Hey everyone. Okay, so can everybody hear me? Yeah, loud and clear. Super. All right, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Good evening, good afternoon, whatever you're tuning in from. I know that we are broadcasting in Europe and in the States, so it's nice to have you all here. This is the third quarterly meetup this year for the Gaming Americas meetups, and yeah, the summer is almost over. So I'm happy to have some of the speakers here who are not on holiday, but yeah, it's a pleasure to have you all here. So this panel will focus on retention and why it's the biggest challenge that is now being faced by the operators in the US and beyond. And I have some very interesting speakers over here. Marina Bogard, Managing Director at Betsson US Corp. Marina, nice to have you here.
Thanks, Zoltan. Appreciate it. Appreciate the opportunity.
All right. I think you have some problems with your video. Maybe if you want to reconnect and try again, but it's no problem. I also have Allan Petrilli, VP of Sales and Growth at Intelitics. Hi, Allan. Nice to see you again. You're on mute.
Someone does that every call and every meeting and every chat. Nice to see you all.
Nice to have you here. All right. John Gordon, CEO and co-founder of Incentive Games. Hi, John.
Yeah, hi, everyone. Nice to be here.
All right. So we've been on this. We had this. I think John and Allan have already been on our quarterly meetups for a while now. Marina is a newcomer, and let's see if she can reconnect. Yeah, and hopefully we will see her later. All right. So the panel. We look at why retention remains such a difficult area for online sportsbook and perhaps also casino brands, and how these challenges can be overcome. It will also discuss how operators can use their retention strategies and tactics as a point of differentiation and stand out in a very highly competitive space, what is going on in the US right now. So I gave you the tour. We did the roundup of the speakers, and now I would like to ask you all to introduce yourself. So let's start with Marina. Say a few words about yourself and the company you're representing.
Yes, absolutely. So Marina Bogard, Managing Director for Betsson Group for North America. Betsson has been around for over 60 years, but we have just recently gone live in the US market, with Colorado being our first B2C state, with the objective really going into a B2B platform provider for casinos and any other companies that are interested in getting into sportsbook. We also have the BetSafe brand in Canada. I think most folks understand that the Ontario province is now going to a regulated market. So we look to open up that market in the next couple months. And then outside of Canada, outside of Ontario, the BetSafe brand is currently live and active, and we're looking forward to that. So appreciate everyone's time, and nice meeting everyone else on the panel.
It's nice to have you here. All right, John.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, I'm John Gordon, CEO and co-founder of Incentive Games. We are the #1 free-to-play games provider in the industry, servicing Bet365, FanDuel, and some of Entain's brands, LiveScore Group, and others. You mentioned there about retention. So we provide daily retention games or acquisition games.
Okay, Allan.
Let me unmute this time. I'm Allan, VP of Sales and Intelitics. We provide a platform for iGaming operators to track and analyze and optimize user acquisition, and also work hand in hand with brands to tie that data back to how they can employ it through the retention strategies. So excited to get into this, and I think it's definitely a challenge in the industry that we're all hoping we can help solve.
Awesome. Okay, so the beginning question for this session is that just how challenging is retention for online sportsbook and casino operators? I think Marina and John will probably discuss about North America, and Allan, you will also approach Canada.
Yeah, I think all of us probably have a little bit of a background across both. So I'm open to however you guys want to.
So ladies first.
All right. Definitely, most operators, casino operators and online sportsbook operators understand the challenges of the cost associated not only with acquisition, but certainly retention. I mean, most of these players tend to be sometimes fickle, right? I mean, they'll chase the promos, they'll chase the opportunities. But I also look at it as an opportunity. I think those operators that understand how to create loyalty, how to create affiliation, personalization of why do I want to continue to come back to the site? So I think it gives us all an opportunity to really kind of rethink and look at things differently, because it's just not sustainable, obviously, from a margin and profitability perspective. So really kind of looking at how do we retain those players in a financially prudent manner by offering up a reason to come back without spending, so much money on the retention.
Okay. So Allan, John, who would like to go first? Don't
Sure,
lie. Okay, John.
Sure. Yeah. So I think Marina touched on it there, is ultimately a daily reason to come back. And you really have to have a reason for them to come back to your site and get through a hook cycle where they get into a habit of a daily habit of coming back to your site. And that's the sort of holy grail for the casino operator or the sportsbook operator, where they get back to your site every day, which just so happens to be what we provide, a daily free game where they come back every day. They go through the hook cycles, 4 or 5 hooks through that cycle, and it becomes part of the daily routine. And you'll see that with the reward machine, which we're launching across 5 states for FanDuel next week. But we're already live in Michigan with some great numbers. But also, I think there's a bit of a misconception in the industry where, we need this whole, elaborate gamification, loyalty program plan, which has all different sort of massive beasts feeding into it. What we found is exactly the opposite. Just make it simple and make it rewarding. The way we take from different industries, or not we Incentive Games, but what I've seen other companies do, they see what a loyalty scheme looks like in a different industry and think they can adapt it to the gaming industry, the iGaming industry, and it doesn't really work like that. When a user feels that they are being in some sort of elaborate loyalty scheme with the gaming company, they naturally want to break out of that because they don't want to feel as if they're being in some sort of gamification mechanic in the long term with a gambling company. So it really is about keeping it simple, not letting the user believe that they're in some sort of loyalty scheme. Just make it rewarding, make it fun, and they'll come back on their own accord.
Okay. Allan?
For me, I think the biggest kind of challenge in retention overall is, I think a lot of people focus when they talk about retention, just like John was talking about, just on loyalty and what that part of your business does from a loyalty and CRM perspective. But I think for proper retention, it comes down across so many different business units. It comes down to product, it comes down to, are you acquiring the right users? It comes down to, are you employing the right CRM and retention strategies within that part of your business? And I think a lot of times we kind of a lot of companies silo and look at retention and CRM as kind of its own beast, when at the end of the day, basically every other part of your business touches it and is important to it. I think sometimes everyone needs to zoom out a little bit and understand that it's not just tied to one part of the business, and that literally every part of your business ties into retention, and get an understanding of how each parts of the business can actually help.
All right,
and what parts are hurting.
Yeah, exactly.
To elaborate on that, Allan made a great point, is you could have the best daily free game in the world, or the best reason to come back to your site in the world, the most rewarding, simple, effective daily free game that we would provide, for instance. But if your core product is not best in class, you will not retain that customer. So you're paying the same as Bet365 or FanDuel or William Hill for that acquisition cost. Now, if you're going to be paying for that, you need to make sure that your core product is comparable, if not better, than their core products. Others, the customer's not fickle. They will take your bonus and they will go back to betting with the other customers.
Okay, it's nice to see you, Marina.
Got it fixed.
Okay, so yeah, of course, retention is difficult because everybody is going now with the bonuses and focusing on acquiring players. But what makes it such a difficult area of operation for the operators?
I mean, it's inherent. On you go, Allan.
I was just going to say, I think, and this ties into a lot of why we built our business on the UA side, maybe not on the retention side, is that so much data in this industry is siloed and not easy to look at on one universal view. So at the end of the day, not only are you trying to figure out strategy when it comes to retention and what's going to work best, a lot of brands actually have difficulty being able to deep dive into their own data to figure out, who are my most profitable players? What are they playing? What should I be offering them? I think that's a massive challenge is because unlike a lot of other industries where everyone owns their own product, there's so many brands who are white labeling their product or white labeling, 10 to 20 different features within their product set where they don't have full control over the product and they don't have full control over the data. And I think that creates a massive challenge in this industry just from an understanding, your own data first before you figuring out what your strategy is going to be. And I think that's a massive challenge.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, just the whole, analytics of being able to potentially, personalize information, personalize offers, personalize that reward loyalty type of programs is a challenge. Definitely.
John, you would like to add to this?
Well, the way I see it is acquisition and retention are obviously intertwined. But when this industry, I believe, is better than any industry at acquisition, right? So we are acquiring like the biggest drive ever. It's to happen in Europe. We've seen it everywhere else now. It's obviously in America, North America's. Now, because that acquisition drive is so strong and there's so much money, those customers that you've just acquired are now being torn away to go to see another product, and then they see another product. And then they'll eventually settle with 2 or 3 that they use regularly. So it's part of its own problem, which is the industry is so great at acquiring, and then it's difficult to retain. And retention is inherently expensive because, as we talked about there, you could use Incentive Games or someone else and acquire and try to retain those customers. But to have a product that's as best in class or stands up, that's got the best slots, that's got the best sportsbook technology, that's got everything you need as a standard, that's not cheap, and it's a huge investment. And as Allan's saying, no one owns their tech these days, so it's where you are in the pecking order in terms of how quickly you're going to get done. If you're the 10th biggest client for that service provider, the software provider, you're not going to get stuff done very quickly. So it's inherently difficult, and I think new content, original content, is difficult to come by as well. So I would always be looking out for trying to make your product as good as it can be first and foremost before you drive anyone to it.
Yeah.
Can I add something there?
Yeah,
just
sure.
quickly. I think, I don't know if you meant it in the way, when you say, when you were mentioning user acquisition or general acquisition in the industry is better than most industries. I would agree with you on volume. I think at the end of the day, this industry is very good at spending a lot of money and acquiring a lot of users and getting them into your ecosystem. I think with this industry, specifically in the US market to date, they've been challenged with huge acquisition costs and lack of loyalty to a degree. Maybe we're not talking about the biggest brand in the industry, but just across it, right? And I think at the end of the day, if you're acquired with how quickly these brands are trying to scoop up market share, at the end of the day, you are acquiring a lot of users that are eventually just not going to be profitable for you. And that makes this job even more difficult because you're sitting with a group of players who at the end of the day will never, be a good customer for you. And you need to figure out, where are you putting your time to be able to extract the most value from your database.
I think Marina can relate to this because being the operator in this panel, they definitely have some insight on this acquiring.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I mean, we're only in one state, and our approach is to be a B2B provider and assist those operators in not only acquisition and retention, but creating a platform that allows them to be unique in terms of service offerings. But an operator, when you look at some of these operators that are also have a retail presence, it makes it a bit easier to be able, to leverage that part of the business with the online business. One is going to be a little bit more of a loss leader as you're pulling traffic into your landline business. So I think, those operators do have a little bit of advantage because they can offer other things. Purely an online operator, it'll be a struggle from a cost perspective initially. But I agree with Allan. You have to figure out then who are your profitable players and who do you want to come back, and how do you weed out those folks that are basically costing you money and not, allowing you to grow your business.
Yeah. John, you wanted to add something to this.
I suppose just to clarify what I meant, I think Allan and I were talking about the same thing, whereby maybe I was using the wrong terminology when I said we're the best at acquiring. What I actually meant was to detriment to the retention part of the industry, because these sign-up offers are so lucrative and so attractive. It makes loyalty almost impossible, and not the most cost-effective acquisition, but very powerful acquisition incentives, which makes it very difficult to ultimately retain unless your product is the best in class or one of. And just to that point, whereas I think the industry needs to really start looking at entertaining the customer. And I know we've had a shift in the way companies call themselves and such, but not just say it, do it. Like we work with operators, and we had some pay to play games, and they would say things like, can we increase the margin on that product? And it would really go against my grain, because what I like to do is keep them there for longer, entertain them, give them enjoyment. A new product, drop it to 2% rather than 5%. They want to go to 12% margin. And it's just, for me, those are the operators that burn out their customers and, bleed them dry. Whereas I think in the long run, we need to look at them as your customers that you're here to entertain, that you're here to keep and cultivate for a longer time, not just how can we increase their GGR daily.
Yeah, I love it, because this is such a forward-thinking session, because we are like you guys are like the wayseers of the gaming industry, because in North America, nobody, I think, focuses on retention right now, because it's all about acquisitions. Maybe they will face this problem in the next 4 or 5 years, like we did in Europe, where we have lots just focusing more on retention. All right, so who among you can give me an example of one area of retention that causes the most headaches?
Well, I think we've said it all in terms of, the cost and retaining your more, profitable players. And to John's point, you want them to continue to come back. You want to entertain them. You want to give them a reason to come back. And maybe it's, other types of play mechanics to enhance their current play mechanics. I mean, those are the things that, from a brand perspective, what makes the brand valuable to those players. And with that then comes an opportunity where they, create referrals to their friends to say, hey, come, play this site, because not only do you get some sort of promotion, but what are other things to keep those players engaged? I do think as the market is just so in its infancy in the US, we are as an industry, we're copying a lot of what's happened in Europe, right? So eventually it'll all come to roost that we do have to retain those players. It's a huge market for operators in this industry. But at the end of the day, it's the same struggle that landline casinos have as well. You have your VIP players But how do you keep those players to come back that maybe they're not spending the huge amount of money, but over time they become a valuable player to you because they keep coming back to your location? Same thing with an online perspective. How do you keep them coming back to it's a form of entertainment. So let's entertain them in a way that makes it valuable for them and makes it fun for them. And, of course they're playing to win money, but they're not necessarily looking for huge, it's just like the lottery. They're not looking necessarily for the huge wins. Those are the players that only maybe spend, $5 on a lottery ticket when the games are really high. But those that consistently buy tickets, those aren't, those are the players that are going to be coming back to you. So how do we engage those players?
Exactly. Allan or John?
Look, I think there's two key areas. First, it goes back to not necessarily owning your own tech stack, because I think there's B2B providers, and we have one on this call, who have built really good products. I think at the end of the day, it's either owning your own tech stack or choosing the right partner who gives you access to the best tools to be able to help you engage your players. And I think second, and it's not focused enough on kind of any US panels, and I think I try to champion it. At the end of the day, for US operators, the biggest struggle for them right now is that, and I think it'll slow down in 2023, is that every couple months they're tasked with, okay, we have to launch in a new state. And it's like all the focus within that operator is, how are we first to market? How are we not late? How do we get our products approved? How do we, how are we live day one in these new markets? And it's the most important thing for them from a market share perspective. And I think that slows down everything else in the business, whether it's retention, whether it's in improving conversion funnels, whether it's adding new games, whether it's adding new integrations. At the end of the day, none of that is as important as getting live in new states. And I think once we start seeing new state launches slow down, you'll start seeing brands be able to focus on that area.
It's like they are mostly focused on opening a new shop rather than focusing on the clients.
And they have no choice. I mean, it is what it is, right? At the end of the day, the most important thing is being first to market in the US. Now, if we look at Ontario, it's not necessarily that, because that launch has been a little bit, hasn't been the greatest launch compared to maybe some of the US states that we look at. I'm speaking as a Canadian to that. But I think at the end of the day, these sportsbooks, they have a job at the end of the day to be live in states that are going regulated. And that just takes priority right now.
All right, John, you would like to add to this?
We're a painkiller for retention, so we don't really see any pain.
All right. So how can these retention challenges be overcome? And don't say Intelitics.
Oh, we can't. We don't solve that. We'll help you acquire the right users at the right cost, but from a retention standpoint, that's on us.
Okay, so Marina, John, how can these retention challenges be overcome?
Yeah, and I think John made a point on some of this is creating an environment that makes it entertaining and exciting. I think we're going to see a little bit more from a social perspective. How do we engage our friends? How a peer-to-peer sort of a betting environment and playing environment. Those are the things that are coming to the forefront. There's opportunity using AI in really customizing some things for players. There's opportunity for, different betting options, different playing options, different playing mechanics. It all comes down to how do we entertain them to keep them playing on the site, but also coming back to the site. And I think we're going to have to look at, those technologies that allow players to be more engaged and allow players to engage their friends and family. Because that's what makes it fun, right? That's what keeps them coming back and wanting to be entertained and, winning some money and being able to share that information with their peer groups.
John?
Okay, so we've been doing this. We would probably, by way of numbers, tens of millions of active users a week, all over the world. And I'm a chemical engineer. Before I started this company, I was a chemical engineer at BP. So we always approach this subject on a scientific basis. So I've done all sorts of data-driven design, all sorts of A/B testing, and I've tried every growth hacking technique in the world you could imagine. And growth hacking is when we do this viral referral thing. And I've done it in other industries, but it doesn't, in my experience, it's not worked in the UK, in the industry because of the social, it's not part of the social norm. It's not really something you would shout about. What we've found is by far and away the most effective is just keep it simple. Is it rewarding? That's it. So we do a daily free game where they just press a button. They don't need to use the cognitive part of the brain, and we make it extremely rewarding. And the results are just phenomenal from a retention point of view. So we would do both acquisition and retention, but I think acquisition is a red herring. I mean, so we never drive traffic. So we would team up with a company and say, look, we will retain, if you bring people to this game, we will retain them on this daily free game. It's up to you to make sure your product's great and make sure you can drive people to it. And that's where we found our niche. And like I say, I've used every gamification technique in the book. And it really, for this industry, is just keep it simple and make it rewarding. That's it.
All right. So
yeah, if I could
go ahead.
If I could comment to John, I think you're absolutely spot on the simplicity. I think, there's so many, and I know you probably have had these conversations with your friends and family members as well as I have, where they would like to bet, but they find that, the terminology and all the information that are on the apps are sometimes a bit intimidating. So how do we make it simple for those initial players to get them comfortable and keep them engaged? So I think John is right on. The simpler, the better, and it keeps players coming back. And you get new players who may be intimidated initially, but it's about education and making that app just be very intuitive, where you don't really have to think too hard about what everything means.
And that's what we see. To elaborate on that is the consumer in North America use maybe 3 apps. They use WhatsApp, Instagram, and something else, I don't know. But unless your product is of the level of Instagram, they will not put up with it. So if there's any bugs, if there's any glitches, if there's any bad experience, they will not use it. Or they will find the best of the bunch that does. And we've seen it. I do a lot of product reviews when I go to the US, and I do it every time I'm there, and I'm astounded by how many companies decide to just throw so much at the product, and it's like overwhelming, where you get lost in some. You never want to make the user feel stupid. They will never come back to your app. And there's products out there where you're like, if you've thought of everything and just threw everything at it. What I like is a measured approach and say, look, everything that you add, you make the ability more complex. And so, you want a feature, you want a product. If you cannot do that seamlessly and elegantly, do not dream of putting it in your app.
All right.
I think, can I just add one thing here? I think who we're going to see win in the North American market is the brands who start really using personalization on their retention side of things. And personalization comes down to, there's 2 sides of it. There's when you're not on the product, but I don't think we talk enough about retention for people who are actually on your product, right? At the end of the day, if I'm going, in Canada, if I'm going to Bet365 or I'm going to BetSafe or I'm going to a product to be able to bet and I'm there, now you want to extract the most value for me when I'm on your product, right? And I'll give you like very simple examples. If I'm someone who's bet on golf in the past and I log into a product and that week is the US Open, how is that not right in my face for my ability to place a bet on the US Open right away? Because there's history there of me betting on that product, right? Or, and I'll give you an example that I literally got a notification from Wayfair this morning, which was like, hey, did you forget that you put this in your cart? You should come back, we'll give you 20% off. Where it's like, if I've played, I don't know, we're talking about cross-sell. If I played a casino game on a sportsbook and it's like, hey, we noticed you opened that, you never played, here's 20 free spins, come back and play. Like that kind of personalization. I know it's not easy from a tech perspective sometimes, but I think when you start seeing brands invest in that's who's going to win. Because at the end of the day, you can drop as many players as you want in different cohorts and send them messaging based on player history and stuff like that. But until you really personalize for each individual user and you have a product that does that, you're going to struggle.
Okay. So I need to keep John among my close friends because he knows how to make fuel. That comes in handy in these times. So yeah, to give something as a shout out to our next panels, there's going to be a fireside chat by 76 Capital about Lucra Sports, which they have figured out this type of sharing the information among friends and family. It's a very awesome application. So okay, so Allan, you said this could be an option, and I hope that people hear it in terms of getting retention, sending out the notification to the players. But can retention strategies and tactics be used to stand out from rivals right now? Because many of them are focusing on player acquisition. Somebody might focus more on retention and maybe becoming a winner. And is there any example of this? Maybe you know of such a company?
I mean, look, I think without going too specific in examples, I think at the end of the day, if you're looking at the US sports betting market, I think it's pretty clear now how many every years we're in, 5 years, 6 years, 4 years, I don't know the exact amount, that the average bettor or the average person opening an account in a sportsbook is not an educated bettor. I think there was a big thought process across the industry that the US has been betting for years. They're going to come in, these are going to be educated bettors. At the end of the day, majority of users that are being acquired are people who want to bet parlays, in play, same game parlays, basically lottery type games like Marina had mentioned kind of earlier, where you can bet $5 and win 1,000, right? I think you're going to see, and I think we've already started to see brands create new game types within their products to be able to try to get people coming back and playing different types of, like, instead of me building my same game parlay, they're going to make them for me based on my history or what's worked. I think you're going to see more companies working with companies like John's at the end of the day to be able to come up with creative ways to engage and quick type of games. I don't have a specific example for you, but I know there's a lot that's going live this NFL season. I think we're going to see tons of this kind of in the first 4 weeks in terms of new product around NFL. Because at the end of the day, the NFL just drives product in this industry, and it will for the next 1,000 years. But yeah, do I think there's an opportunity for someone to stand out? Look, I don't think anyone's doing retention incredibly well right now. I think there's a big opportunity there. But it depends who you're talking to, right? If we're talking about the big four, you know, they're focusing on both. If you're talking about any other sportsbook operator who's launching in the market, I think they're focused on user acquisition, but at the end of the day, I think they need to have a massive focus on retention because they're going to be under bigger pressure to turn profits quicker. And if they're not, they won't.
Marina?
Yeah, I mean, completely agree with Allan. The focus right now is purely on acquisition. You know, and I've seen some that are better than others in terms of player engagement. I mean, I have various sportbook apps that I look at just to have a clearer understanding of what the competition is doing, what the market is doing. And some are a bit better, although I wouldn't say it was 100% personalized. It's more, more communication that I get from some versus the others, but not necessarily personalized. So I do think that is definitely an opportunity. But it comes down to what Allan said previously in terms of analytics. You know, how much information do you have about your player to truly make it more personalized and engaging? But yeah, right now it is all about acquisition from what I see in terms of what the promotions are. As new states are opening up, I think it'll be a few more years before some of the companies really start looking at the retention policies.
All right. John?
What was the question, sorry?
So the question is, can retention strategies and tactics be used to stand out from the rivals? And if you have some example for this, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to have to go back to just the ones we do, which is for live score, for Virgin Bet, for FanDuel, for Bet365, a daily free game that the user comes back. We've never seen these case studies are just phenomenal. And what it is, it's a daily free game where they play it and they get rewarded for their engagement. the users are playing it 5-6, on average 5 and 6 days a week, which increases the active player betting days, which is directly proportional to the GGR. I mean, it's that simple.
Okay. So for anybody being live on YouTube watching this, you maybe would like to head over in an hour to our website, to gamingamericas.com. There's a press release coming out of a new partnership that focuses on retention of players of a giant operator in the US. It's a new partnership which will it's under embargo for 1 hour, but I won't spoil the surprise. It's going to be very interesting. All right, so what are the upsides of mastering the art of retention? We are talking about the art of retention over here in this panel. So what are the upsides of mastering this art?
Well, obviously revenue, right? Revenue and margin, that is definitely the upside, in lowering your cost of acquisition. If you have a nice pool of returning customers, your acquisition costs will shift more into that, and your revenue line will continue to grow. So that is the main upside, is to keep those players and increase your margin and top line revenue.
Okay. Allan, John?
You also, I mean, at the end of the day, it goes hand in hand, but you also shrink the available market for your competitors, right? At the end of the day, if you're retaining customers, you're shrinking the knowing better market across the rest of the US, right? So again, those are kind of the same thing, but I think that's just an important kind of note, Ted.
Yeah, whoever masters retention is a king. That has been in every industry, and certainly in this one, and every other market. If you retain your customers for longer, and unfortunately, like I say, it's typically, even if, jokes aside about using our games, that's just one part of the equation. If your overall product isn't best in class or thereabouts, then you still won't retain them.
Okay, and are there any risks if operators don't nail this part of the business? I mean, will they keep doing acquisition over and over? And you have millions of players, billions of players out there. You can just focus on acquisition, having a new player, then forgetting about him.
You will run out of money, and your investors will stop believing your forecast, because your share price will drop eventually. You run out of runway, because if you keep saying, it's one thing in America where companies would say, yeah, we're going to get this and this, but if you look at the reports, they keep saying that they're going to reduce their acquisition cost, but that doesn't happen. So if they're not retaining and the acquisition costs keep going up, which they are, and they do in any competitive market, eventually the chickens will come home to roost. So ultimately you need to look at your product, and you need to retain those customers.
Okay. Marina?
I think, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Allan.
I was going to say, I think, unfortunately, for a lot of sportsbook operators, they've been waiting for years on casino to regulate across other states so that they can increase their margins. And we've seen quite clearly that's just not happening, and there's no sight of that in the very near future. So I think that's why you're seeing a shift in the industry to saying we need to. Again, I agree with John saying that we need to spend less, because I think in 2 weeks we'll notice that is indeed not the case across a lot of operators for the NFL season. I think they've reduced spend ahead of NFL, but I don't see that during NFL. I mean, I think it's going to be crazy again. But at the end of the day, not having casino to lean back on from a profit and margin perspective means that they need to start getting better at retaining customers, and that's going to be incredibly important.
Yeah. I really don't have anything more to add. I think John and Allan are right on.
All right. So traditionally, gambling has been in a physical location in America, right? Such as a casino, and in many states, sports betting is still based around the physical location. So how has this past 2-3 years influenced the sports bettor compared to the earlier ages in terms of acquisition? Do you maybe have so many insights on this, in land-based casinos and in the sports betting halls?
In terms of where players will go and where the revenue will flow, well, I think online gaming in general, whether it's sportsbook or casino type products, will continue to massively grow in the US market. I mean, a lot of the casinos are not in areas where it's easy to get to. From a local perspective, I mean, certainly you have things like Las Vegas and the East Coast, which are more resort type of locations. But when you look at some of these other, hundreds and hundreds of casinos that are not easy to get to, and they typically draw from those local markets. So those will always be there. You're going to have companies like Caesars and MGM that will create loyalty and reward programs with their online type of service to draw players to come into the casinos. I mean, that's been going on for quite some time. But I do think online gaming and online gambling in general will at some point overtake the revenue that we see at the casinos. But it'll continue to drive traffic there. It's another form of entertainment. People just like to go to casinos, but it's easy to play online, right? It's easy to be, if you're 2-3 hours away from the nearest casino, you're going to be playing online, and maybe you go there, once a month or over the weekends. So one will, I think, overtake the other over time, but it'll be leveraged across those two platforms.
Okay, John, Allan, would you like to add to this?
I don't have much to add to that. I would have said pretty much what Marina said, so I agree.
Yeah, I concur.
Okay, so any of you guys are also active in Europe, right? Okay, so what are the differences between the players in North America and Europe in terms of different market tactics in player acquisition?
The customer values extremely high in North America. That's a big difference in comparison. But Joe should say, acquisition games, which we do as well. We found that if you need a North American client or customer to touch the screen more than 5 times, you're not going to acquire them on a free-to-play game or any sort of predictor. Having some sort of like lots and lots of picks, they just drop off after 4. There is a certain amount of motivation a user has when they're filling out a form, or what they feel like is filling out a form or entering, and in America, it's by far and away the shortest. Whereas someone in India or Africa or Europe, parts of Europe, they're more time rich and cash poor in certain regions, so they would spend their time to make those selections. Where in America, it seems like even like if you're doing a big jackpot game, they feel a lot of it's scammy if it's free and you can win cash prizes. So there's a lot, trust is a thing, unless you've got an NFL superstar or MLB or whichever. So there are traits like that you would expect, but it is quite acute in North America, whereby their time is extremely limited, and it just needs to be the best in class experience, or you will lose them.
Okay, Marina?
Yeah, definitely. The user experience and the app experience is critical. To John's point earlier, simple, easy, getting to where you need to go those are table stakes. You have to have those. I think Europe, UK in particular, when I think about betting, I mean, that's been around for such a long time. I think, the folks there truly understand how to bet on sports. US is still early stages. I mean, you have those players that probably have been playing in the gray market for a long time, but there is such an open, wide opportunity for new players now in the US. I think from what I see, at least, most of the learnings from Europe have now been brought into the US, but not necessarily, I think, sustainable. I think the market here is a bit different. So I think over time, we're probably going to see an evolution and more innovative type of play for a much larger demographic as well. When I look at Europe, it is highly concentrated on male bettors, whereas you look at some of the studies over the last few years, 4 out of 10 identify as female bettors. So I think it's an area of opportunity in the US that maybe doesn't exist in Europe today, where we could actually leverage as an industry, certain demographics that may be underrepresented today to grow the player base.
Okay, so now we have an expert over here, Allan, who will say you don't know anything about retention. Player acquisition. We are the experts. Fill us in.
No, not at all. Look, I think let's use UK, because if we start using Europe, there's too many geos that differ from each other, so it's hard to kind of pinpoint.
Some of which are very stupid.
We can have a whole other panel on that. If you look at the UK, any kind of, I call them a child. Anyone under the age of 30 grew up with their parents betting, whether they were going to a soccer game or football game. I don't want to make John or anyone else upset. Betting on sports. They grew up and it was innate. It was part of culture, right? That is not what has happened in the North American culture. And I'll even go as far as saying if it was happening in your household, a lot of that was quiet. It wasn't something that was just talked about, out loud. So I think when you look at the UK market specifically, the younger demographic is already a lot more experienced when it comes to betting. On the flip side, I'll also say UK operators or European operators in general have had to master user acquisition at a much higher degree than anyone in North America, simply because they didn't have the budgets that a lot of these North American companies have to be able to just throw at user acquisition right out of the gate, right? You might look at someone like a Sky Bet Fund. They obviously have all their above the line and digital media properties and whatever. But if you're looking at the market in general, they had to be able to be profitable a lot quicker than anyone in North America. So I think from a user acquisition perspective, they're light years ahead of what we've kind of seen in North America. But it's unfair to compare the two because the market's been around for so long, right? And I don't know, I can't speak to anyone else on this call, but it's like I wasn't active in the market anywhere close to when it first launched. So for me to be able to say what those times were back then, I don't really know. But I do think, and I think Marina hit kind of the nail on the head. There's such a green market in the US market, both from a female perspective, both just from a non-experienced bettor. And I think I was even mistaken when the market opened. I always thought, everyone in the US bets. This is a highly educated market, and everything I thought kind of 10 years ago was wrong. At the end of the day, it's not an educated market. And realistically, your kind of top tier VIP bettors are not even betting at the legalized sportsbooks because they're not given the leeway to be able to do it. So it's a bit of a weird market where you're trying to, at the end of the day, a lot of these, they're not sportsbooks at the end of the day, like John said, they're entertainers. They're trying to just they're trying to get your money, and they want players who are going to come back and bet a lot. They're not necessarily looking for VIP players because those guys are going to take them. So it's a little bit of a different market than if you look at US to UK. And I think they need to be treated completely differently. I know you can learn from the UK, but at the end of the day, it's a completely different beast.
All right. So
that was long-winded. I'm sorry.
No worries. Just before we wrap it up with the final question, I see there's a question in the chat from Daniel Kusterski asking all of the panelists, if all the data is saying that parlays and less sophisticated bets are making all the money, how does that influence how you are approaching acquisition and retention? So anyone would like to take this?
I can make a comment to Daniel. He's right. Parlays is definitely where a lot of the bets are coming in from. But back to the simplicity, I think, if you look at all the apps today, there's very little differentiation on what's on that app besides maybe colors and placement. But everything else pretty much looks the same. So, I think as an industry, we need to simplify the ability to show only what players want to see. So when someone's a new player, and maybe they just want to bet on NFL and nothing else, and let's get rid of that noise and just make it simple for them. And I think that's where we're going to have to get to as an industry, to allow a player journey to start off simple and then have them determine what more they want to see and what more they want to play on. And I've been having these conversations for the last couple of months with, various individuals, because we do see there isn't a lot of differentiation in the industry with sportsbook operators. And I think we're going to have to take a look at how do we simplify the messaging and how do we simplify the betting process and education to continue to grow with these players as they become more sophisticated. As Allan said, people here didn't grow up with gaming. And in fact, most people didn't want to tell anybody that they had a bookie that they're placing bets on. So now it's all in the open, but it's still, early stages. And we have to create a journey for folks coming on to these platforms to make it easy, simple, and let them grow with us.
Yeah, you also touched base. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think one of the more interesting, and I don't have the data in terms of revenue or anything like that, but one of the more interesting situations in the US is if you look at someone like a Barstool and what they build in their community, and then they have the product, I'm not saying the product is good enough to back up what they have in the community, but what I mean is you've built a community that is incredibly loyal to Barstool, the brand. You have a betting product where, I'm in Canada, so I follow the guys on Spinning Chicklets a lot, right? I'm a hockey fan. They'll have acquisition promos where they'll have those parlays already built for you, boosted odds, where it's their messaging is not, hey, come and get your $5,000 risk-free bet. Their messaging is, hey, sign up and we'll give you this free parlay that pays out, $1,000 or whatever that is. And I think when you start getting creative like that in user acquisition and you start speaking directly to what people understand, I think there's a big advantage to how you can lower your user acquisition costs as opposed to just throwing around the $5,000 free bet over and over and over again. So I think we're going to start seeing more of that.
Right. So Marina touched based on sustainability in one of her answers, and that leads us to our final question for this session. And how does the future of retention look like? It has to be sustainable, but how does it look like? So, who would like to go first on this?
Well, I think it'll be several prongs in what the future looks like. I think we're going to continue to see innovation from this industry. I think AI is going to be one of those where we can, personalize and customize the messaging and the experience that users have. I do think social will be another. Peer-to-peer social interactions will continue to grow into these platforms. We don't see a lot of that today. I mean, you can post something on Facebook or Instagram of your win, but it has to be more than that. It has to be more of a community. It has to be more interactive and more allows players to be more engaged in that process. So, I think those two things, and I think, different types of betting mechanisms. Allan touched on the parlays where it's all set for you. That makes it easy. You don't really have to think about it. It's a one-click in-game, in-play type of bets as well. I think we're going to see more of that to continue to, with that engagement, whether you're sitting in front of your TV or live at an event, to be able to push messages out on different in-play mechanics. I think we'll also see a little bit more of that. So it'll be interesting. I think, there'll probably be some things that we haven't even thought about that are going to be coming out. It's just so early in its infancy here in the North America market, but I think it's exciting. I think there's lots of opportunity for growth and innovation.
Definitely. John, Allan, who would like to go next?
Yeah, so just the amazing core products, daily free games, which are simple and rewarding. That's it.
Okay. That was...
You make it sound so easy, John. Just do this.
I think it comes back down to personalization at the end of the day. I think I don't want to say every other industry does this well, but most other industries focus on this. It kind of blows my mind in for a sportsbook, for example. Like when you sign up a user, why are you not finding out who their favorite sports team is? Do they bet on their favorite sports team or do they stay away from it? Exactly. What are their favorite sports? Like walk them through a funnel where you collect this information. Don't just assume it. John would be very knowledgeable in this in terms of their acquisition funnels to their products, where you collect basic information on a user so you can personalize a product for them. This is stuff that's not incredibly difficult to do. I do think the future is going to be incredibly personalized because that's where every other industry is going to. And I don't think that we as an industry can afford to not go there. I think it would be detrimental.
All right. So with this high note, I would like to thank everyone for joining this session as we move to the next sessions. And by the way, if anybody would like to know about the legislations that might be keeping retention and acquisition in a place. We also have a compliance-related panel discussion right after this next fireside chat. And then later on, we will speak about cryptocurrencies and, of course, about Lucra Sports, which I've mentioned already. So, Marina, Allan, John, it was nice to have you here. Thank you so much for joining.